Hey guys, it's Otti again. I'm here in an online call with Ashton Nyte from the band The Awakening. Hey, first of all,
Good day. How are you doing?
fine, and you?
Oh, very well, thank you. Just had a nice strong coffee, so I'm ready for the day.
Perfect, perfect. As we talked before, it's morning where we are now in St. Louis. Here's afternoon, so we have a little time difference, but you have had a good night, good sleep.
Yeah, pretty much. I'm working on 1,000 different things at the moment, so sleep is a little difficult because I can't switch my brain off. But that's how it goes sometimes.
I know what you mean. I'm also some kind of night worker. When the night comes, I
Yeah.
start to think, to work, and have all my ideas, and best things have been done at night, but afterwards sleeping is really really difficult.
Yeah, it's like being on tour, when you've played the show, it's just really difficult to just kind of calm down and go to sleep after that. So you need a long period of time afterwards to just
Yeah, really
be in touch.
great. And touring is a good point because this is what we want to talk about. You're coming on a tour, you have a new album, but as
Yeah.
people might kick in that really have no idea who you are, how would you describe the awakening for a stranger at a bar, for example?
Well, we essentially started off as a Gothic rock band way back in the late 90s, and that's still the kind of the bedrock of the band's identity. Over the years, I've incorporated a lot of different flavors to the sound and to the vision of the awakening. So currently, I think it incorporates more dark wave and electronic elements as well as some acoustic and theatrical elements. So it's more diverse than the term Gothic rock would necessarily portray. I think it's just a dark music project. It's got I kind of create what inspires me, and hopefully it inspires other people too.
Yeah. And how did this start? Because you come from South Africa, as far as I know.
Yes.
Have you had some scene there back then? Some Gothic scene?
Oh yes. Oh yes. I think it was one of those situations where we helped build the scene as much as the scene helped support us. It was kind of a give and take. There weren't too many Gothic rock bands operating at the time, and The Awakening, surprisingly, got a really really big following in South Africa in the late 90s, and we didn't just play in kind of a underground scene. We were also a mainstream rock band essentially, where we ended up headlining the biggest music festivals in South Africa and had hits on the radio and all that kind of thing, which is wild when you think about my voice and the kind of work that I've done over the years. But I think it was just one of those situations where the stars aligned and people were ready for something different. And I was just following my passion, following what I wanted to do. And I think in the beginning, like so many artists, you're back in those days, it was really exciting. The thought of hearing yourself on the radio was was pretty exciting. And then as that happened, then you want to see yourself on a nice big stage, and then and so on and so on, just keep building. But we're really well supported in South Africa, and South Africa had a really strong dark scene for many years. We used to play a venue that had 5 dance floors, for example, and a huge stage. And so it's surprising. I know people don't associate a country like South Africa with such a strong alternative scene, but it's always been very strong there.
And do you have some other bands that you could recommend for people to listen to from South Africa that are somehow dark Gothic style?
Absolutely. A good friend of mine, his name is Sito. He recently, I think the last couple of years, he started a band called Blood Honey, which is on the more kind of, I guess, dark wave synthy side of things. And I did guest vocals on one of the songs for Blood Honey's latest album, which was a nice little vampire song that we did together called She's One of Us. So I highly recommend checking out Blood Honey. And our the bands that predate the awakening in South Africa, there's a band called No Friends of Harry, who around in the 80s. So they were kind of like the godfathers of goth in South Africa. And there was a band called The Gathering, but I'm not sure if they've done anything in a long, long time. So yeah, for sure, check out Blood Honey.
Yeah, cool. And back to your band, to The Awakening. We can't tell the whole story because it's, yeah, I think almost 30 years now. But do you have maybe 2 or 3 important turning points in your history that changed your way, your story?
Yeah. Wow, 2 or 3. Yeah, more like 40.
Can be more if you
Um,
want.
yeah. I mean, I think when you do something like Headline, the country's biggest festival, it obviously has a profound effect on you because you've taken something that you made in a bedroom that you were just really making for yourself and for 10 friends, and to hear, 30,000 people singing along with your song it's incredible. I mean, it's very empowering, and it can have obviously negative impact on your personality. Fortunately, I think for us, it's always just been. I just see these things as such blessings. It's such a privilege to be able to even do what I do for a living, and then to reach that sort of level of appreciation and recognition is amazing. That was significant. Obviously, moving to the United States was a big change for me. And to answer your question, I met my wife here. That's how I ended up moving to the US. And that was back in '07. We were touring the States for the second time. I'd never planned on living here, but, love is a powerful thing. And it was love at first sight. And I finished the tour, sent the band home, and came back here to spend time with her. And that was that. So we've been married now since '09. That's obviously a pretty important piece of my life story. And in addition to, I'll give you a third thing. I think running a solo career in tandem with the Awakening, simultaneously, has also had its own effect. I think the two projects will obviously influence each other because I'm the same guy. But with the Awakening, I'm exploring certain elements of my personality and my artistic loves, really. And often with the solo work, I kind of get to do the other things that don't really fit into the Awakening's world. And I think writing my first book in 2020, when COVID was raging and I just lost my father, and there was a lot going on. I think that was pivotal as well, because that particular solo record, Waiting for a Voice, is the most kind of personal and intimate thing I've made. And again, I think they speak to each other, and we are essentially the sum of our influences. And to be able to draw on the literary side and poetry and all these other loves was also something that has impacted what I do on a day-to-day basis. So I hope that's 3 things answering your question.
Yeah, sure, for sure. And cool things. And for example, talking about influences, you probably often are asked for the bands that influence you, but what influenced you to get into the goth scene? Like you mentioned, for example, poetry and stuff. What have been the things that made this scene for you perfect?
My very first music love was Elvis Presley. I saw the '68 comeback special, a rerun of that, and he was all dressed in black, and he said, "Are you looking for trouble?" And I said, "Yes." And that made me love music, which is not made me love, I really love music, but that gave me the desire to perform, I should say. And then I discovered David Bowie, and David Bowie made me want to be an artist, to write my own songs, to create. And then I always say that, and then I discovered Kate Bush, and she made me want to be a magician in a musical sense. And I think the first concert footage I'd seen of a goth band was, I had a VHS copy of Bauhaus, Shadow of Light, and that just blew me away, because I felt like I was seeing a manifestation of what I wanted to do, and it had already happened. So I was like, okay, I can't do it exactly like that then. And it's those sorts of things. I mean, my earliest goth influences were probably what most people would refer to as kind of the forerunners of the scene, which is Bauhaus and the Sisters of Mercy. I similarly, I had the Sisters of Mercy live video. I didn't enjoy it quite as much as the Bauhaus live video, but it's those were things that definitely influenced me. And then, of course, being a passionate fan of music, I grew up with rock and roll, and with then metal and hard rock, and everything from Led Zeppelin to Queen and all Pink Floyd, all those sort of classic rock bands. And I was always drawn to the performers, like the bands that had the strong frontman or frontwoman, just that desire to engage with an audience and communicate and commune with an audience has always been important to me. And I found that I could put all of those elements into this pot and call it Gothic rock, call it whatever you want to call it. And you get to be as expressive as you want to, and you get to be as experimental as you want to, and there's support for that, and that's wonderful, because otherwise you're just creating in a void, which is especially true these days, where everyone's making music on their computers at home, and we're getting flooded with all of this stuff. I think having that human connection, my whole history is based on live performance and the human interaction, and I think that especially with AI and all the stuff we're struggling with now, that's become even more important to gain. So that's my brief story of Gothic rock for me.
But sure, as you mentioned, for example, AI, probably this is something that you are thinking of towards nowadays, because every artist now has to do somehow with it, to deal with it, with AI, like stealing your music and making something out of it, or you
Yeah,
even can use it in some ways. What's your point on it?
I'm not a fan of AI. I don't like the environmental implications of the data centers and all that kind of stuff. I think it's awful. I think that while there are obviously tools where it would be appropriate to have automated intelligence doing that sort of work for us, I feel that often it's misappropriated and it's taking away from spaces that we really don't need to be taken away from, most notably the arts, and that's everything in the art sphere, from movies to paintings to obviously what we do, singing and writing and creating. And yeah, I'm not very positive about it in that sense at all. I choose to do things organically and create my sounds as organically as possible, which is tricky when you're using synthesized sounds in a kind of electronic or dark wave setting. But I prefer to use, whether it's a VST or a synthesizer, I'd rather use that and manipulate it myself rather than have some kind of preset where I'm kind of hitting a button and letting AI do everything. To me, that is craft or commerce. It's not art. And yeah, I'm not a fan.
See what you mean. And you mentioned moving to the US for your wife for love. But how did this step change your way with the awakening? Because sending the band back to South Africa and then living in the US probably brought some problems, maybe, or was it easy?
Yeah, well, it was very difficult because, I mean, the US is many times larger than any country, really, definitely many times larger than South Africa. And to have gone from being kind of so prominent in one country to being absolutely nobody in another country, on the positive side, it's very humbling. And I think I grew a lot as a human being. On the negative side, my art really suffered because it was very difficult to get the show back on the road. It was very difficult to build some kind of network, to build an infrastructure again, because in South Africa at that point when I left, I had my various musical projects. I had a music studio, a record label. I was running a nightclub. I had a whole little alternative world going there. So to come here and just be a guy with a weird accent, basically, was quite an adjustment, and continues to be. There's always going to be things that just don't quite sit right when it's not the place you're from. However, I think it has really made me try to do what I do as best as I possibly can, the way you would right in the beginning of a career. And I think that's healthy, to have that kind of infusion of that hunger to make the best work you possibly can, to chase every dream and chase every opportunity, even though a lot of it just ends up being tiring and dead ends and whatever. I think it's it's something that benefited me emotionally and as a human being for sure. And to get back, sorry, and so the awakening, it's always ultimately been me. So in the studio, I write everything, I play everything, I produce everything, with the exception of one record that featured some of the band members. So ultimately, it's been kind of a changing cast of band members over the years. And however, I've had the same South African drummer now since 2006. So I just fly him wherever we need to be. And similarly, we had the same guitarist since '09. And then bass guitarists have been kind of difficult to hold on to, but we have an amazing bass guitarist now who's from the Netherlands, and he joined us last year, and it's wonderful. So it wasn't really a case of excuse me, leaving the band behind. Everyone kind of was doing various projects and had various hats on. But it's been wonderful, especially with Seven, my longtime drummer and longtime friend, because he brings more like any true band member. It's family. They bring a lot to the party. It's not just playing the drums live. It's everything about that person and what they offer. And I'm very fortunate to work with wonderful people.
Yeah, that's most important, I think, especially when you're on tour, having people around that you really feel well with and that are friends somehow is better than having
Yeah.
some people you just have like hired guns, for example.
Oh yeah, and I've done that. I've had to do that on a few instances. It's just sometimes logistically doesn't work out, or financially it's impossible to get someone from A to B, and there's some opportunity. But the hired gun thing it's never the same as a band family, and I think that's the hardest thing, honestly, with bands is managing people, managing yourself in the context of people, because we're all humans. We've all got lives and a lot going on far beyond what we're singing or what instrument we're playing, or whatever it is. So it's one of the really beautiful aspects of collaborative work. It's also the most challenging, So that's how it is.
Yeah, so. But this brings me to the current album or coming album. Now, as we record, I think it's 10 days till it comes out.
Yeah.
So
Yes.
when this interview is published, probably 4 days, 5 days or something, I don't know. I will publish it next week. It's The Lost Theater.
Yeah.
But you recorded it all your own, or have you taken your band members somehow into the process?
No, this one was me. I made the record by myself, as I usually do. And however, I had formulated the live show for The Lost Theater was sort of something I've been working on for a couple of years, ever since I did the self-titled album, and then we started touring. I've been kind of thinking about how to get this to a space that's more satisfying for me as an artist and a performer who's been doing it for a long time, And the Lost Theater concept sort of came out of that, and an idea of sort of an evolving show where the band members aren't just limited to one instrument necessarily, and the stylistically it's not limited to one style, etc., etc. So the live sort of dreamt up the live show first, and then kind of created an album that I thought would work really well in the setting that I was envisaging. And then of course the idea of The Lost Theater, of course, has many levels. There's everything we were talking about with AI and the lack of communication and connection that so many of us feel because of this strange digital filter that we now have in between everything. And there is indeed a lost theater, a lost art, lost connection. And so it's on one level, it's seeking that out and celebrating that connection that humans still have with each other in a space, ostensibly in a lost theater. So these ideas really appeal to me, and I thought it would be just a exciting concept to write an album around, and that's how that evolved. And the first single is Until the Dawn, which is probably the most kind of traditional song on the record. The most familiar sounding for Awakening fans, which is why we released it as the first single to kind of let everybody know that everything's okay. Um, and of course, as more is revealed, I think people will be excited by the kind of the diversity of the album. And I do think it's not that we're playing every song of the album in the show, but I think that the album and the show there's a wonderful synergy between those two things, and that was important to me for this record.
Let's see. So the album is like organic, grown out of your show and of the development somehow.
Yes, yeah.
And the funny thing is, it opens with some track Berlin, but it's only some piano track. So what's the idea behind this, and which connection do you have to Berlin?
I yeah, I love what Berlin. I love the complexity of a city like Berlin, and the artistic history. The I mean, many of my heroes went there to kind of find themselves. Most notably, David Bowie. We so many Bowie fans regard what's known as the Berlin trilogy as our favorite piece of his puzzle, or at least a very prominent piece. And I think that you just feel that when you're in a city like Berlin, and I named this one specifically Berlin as a homage to that space and to that artistic diversity and cultural diversity. And I thought there are a lot of that's a kind of a theme that pops up on this record. There's a song called Severed, which makes the point, love is love, and it's important to me to, especially in this time, to be really obvious about the need for compassion and acceptance and inclusivity and all of these really important truths. So I thought starting with Berlin as the sort of artistic bedrock of that idea, or one of the artistic bedrocks of that idea, just seemed like a good place to start, And I also, my relationship with German theater or film, Berlin pops up a lot, and I think the song is very cinematic, and it helps. I know it's just an instrumental piece, but I think it sets the scene for what's to come, which I enjoy. I enjoy doing a kind of an intro piece for an album or an intro piece for a show. I like the drama and the sort of preparing the audience or the listener for what's to come.
So you can say you do some kind of storytelling on the whole album, and people should listen from the beginning to the end, hopefully.
Yes, absolutely. I think it's a strong album melodically, so you can listen to individual singles and enjoy them, for their own right. But yes, it's definitely created to be a piece, like a film, to be enjoyed from start to finish, preferably on a good set of headphones with the lights low and whatever beverage you see yourself enjoying in that experience. So yeah, I tend to write my albums that way. I like them to tell a story and to have a theme and to have a flow. I think this one does that really well. And there are definitely lyrical connections that keep reappearing, and then melodic, thematic qualities that keep sort of resurfacing throughout. So it's again in a time where everything's about the single and 5-second TikTok and all of that. I think it's becoming increasingly rare to actually approach an album like an album and enjoy an album like an album. And while that audience might be diminishing, I still care about it, so I'm still going to create it,
But is this a bigger challenge nowadays with TikTok or the algorithms to say, okay, you do your way, and you still have to deal with these things nowadays?
Oh yeah. Yeah. It's I think with anything it's how much are you going to let it affect you, It's I really don't think about marketing when I'm making any piece of art. It sounds very idealistic, but I really don't, because I have throughout my career occasionally made that mistake, and I've usually made the worst work of my life when I do that. I really love tapping into a kind of a sort of creative spirit, if you will, and then staying true to that until the work is finished. And oftentimes I'll write 30 or 40 songs just for one album, and then find out which ones are telling the story best and which ones are coexisting best. Sometimes they coexist because they're so different. Sometimes they coexist because they've got things in common, you know? And I think that is also symbolic of life and of humankind. And that's ultimately, every time I write an album, I'm trying to connect with people, and I'm trying to find my place in the world, which is increasingly difficult with the way the world is going. But it's a challenge we're all in together. And I think that music is so powerful and so unifying that it's a challenge worth confronting and worth embracing and dealing with, you know.
And when you say 30 or 40 songs, what happens to the rest? Do you have some pool where you can put out for the next album, or is it that you say, okay, every album has its own space?
It's a good question. Sometimes, sometimes I'm chasing a certain feeling or a certain, whatever it is, a certain idea, a certain energy, and I'll write 3 or 4 songs in that vein until I get the one that is just right. And then I feel like, well, I don't want to have both of these on here because they're kind of doing the same thing. So they'll end up, or I have a situation where something in its infancy isn't even kind of, it's not going to work with this particular album, so it goes into that pool. And it's usually those ones, those half-finished ideas that might be revisited later. And I don't know, I have a strange sense of security knowing that I've got all of these like backup songs, like just in case. However, when I start making a new record, I'll start off with a lot of songs that are kind of outtakes and unreleased songs and whatever. And I'll start working on those, kind of producing them the way I want the new record to sound. But then inevitably a spark happens, and I end up writing a whole bunch of new songs. And then none of those old ones get used. You know, they kind of stay in the shoebox. But from time to time, some of them creep in. And on this record, I think there were 2 that were semi-completed after I did the last record. And I just knew that they wanted to be on an album. So they're on this record. And then there's one that I'd written the music like 15 years ago and just couldn't, I'd revisit it from time to time and couldn't find the right words and the right melody for it. And then when I was making this record, it just happened. That's a song called Drown, which has got this kind of almost industrial sort of drum groove, but then offset with acoustic guitars and things. And yeah, it works well on this record. It wouldn't have worked well on any other record. So I like that. It's like these sort of prodigal children that come home and say, okay, we're ready now. Let's meet the world, you know.
But this brings me to, as you mentioned before, you have The Awakening, but also Ashton Nyte solo, which is somehow different in the style and stuff. Do you sometimes put the ideas from one project to the other because you say this fits better or somehow?
Sometimes, yeah. It's I think as the years have gone by, they intersect a little bit more frequently than they used to. I think when I started releasing solo records, I'd done 3 albums as The Awakening, and I really wanted to just do something completely different. So the first solo record was very different to The Awakening, and it was this kind of Ziggy Stardust glam rock, kind of very colorful T-Rex kind of energy, which wasn't something you'd find in The Awakening necessarily. But as the years have gone by and I made records like Some Kind of Satellite, which have a sort of a post-punk new wave element, or a theme, I should say, you could argue that there were a song or 2 on there that probably could have gotten a different treatment and ended up an Awakening song. But again, it's because I tend to write albums. So I stay in a space, and I think over the years, I've become less concerned about, oh, that could have been this and that could have been that. Ultimately, whatever serves the song best, you know, if the song is just happier being associated with these other songs, then that's where it's going to be, you know. And I think with the last 6 years specifically, my solo work has become more acoustic focused and more sort of singer-songwriter with a kind of a in a darker way, but in that sort of space. And I think I've actually started working on the next solo record, and it embraces that and takes it even further into a kind of a dark folk storyteller sort of space, which I then, knowing I'm doing that, I kind of shy away from doing that with The Awakening. It's that kind of thing, giving each project its own space, but with enough crossover that fans of one may well enjoy both, and but again, it's whatever works for the song that I try to serve.
Well, and this leads to you're coming on tour to Europe
Mm.
in September. I think it starts even in August somewhere. Is it like that?
No, we start on the 2nd of September, a solo show in Dortmund, and I've played there a few times over the years. It's a beautiful church, Pauluskirche, in Dortmund, and a fan reached out years ago and just said he had seen something there, like an unplugged thing with candles and everything, and he thought this would be great for Ashton, and it was, and I did that in 2024 when we did the self-titled Awakening album, and then we did it again last year as a Awakening Unplugged, and this year it'll be a solo show again with a different set. So we start on the 2nd in Dortmund, and then we're in Cologne on the 3rd at where is it? Club Volta. In Cologne, and then Hamburg on the 4th at Noch Speicher, where we've played last year, which was wonderful, lovely people. And then we're playing NCN Festival on the 5th, and then Berlin Maschinenhaus in Berlin on the 6th. And then I've got a solo tour that's mostly private acoustic shows, but there are a couple of public ones. One public one in Geneva, Switzerland on the 8th, and then another public one in Bergerac in France on the 10th. Other than that, they're all private shows, but which is a nice counterbalance to doing all of the high energy, dramatic Awakening shows, and then to come and get really small and intimate with the acoustic shows, because I enjoy both. So it's wonderful to be able to go on tour and kind of satisfy both sides of my artistic personality,
And also probably better for flying over to Europe, having all the expenses, and you can say, okay, you stay a little bit longer. You don't have to pay all the band members the whole time, but have some time here.
Yeah, absolutely. It's an unfortunate reality, but that is the reality. And with everything that's going on in the world, travel has become even more expensive, as you well know, and petrol and everything's more expensive. So yeah, we can't. I mean, it's a long flight from here to Frankfurt, to just come there and play 2 shows and go home. It's just not going to be financially viable. So yeah, I do try and, with the help of Irfa, my fabulous tour manager and assistant and wizard of all things, we try to build out these tours a little more, and with Nadine, who's helping with booking. It's been a long road to kind of get the show back on the road, so to speak, especially after COVID. But it's really lovely to be able to tour like this again. And last year I think we did 9 countries last year, so it was a busy year. We did Germany and Poland and France and the Netherlands and the US and Canada and Mexico for the first time. And then, of course, South Africa for the first time in a long time. We went back and played a festival and some shows there. So this year, not so many shows, but we'll probably, this year it's Germany, France, and Switzerland. So not bad.
I know many bands that haven't that much countries, that much touring here. And is there a significant difference between the countries where you play? That you can say, for example, Germany is like this and France like that?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, I think there's a reason I keep coming back to Germany. I really, and I'll be generalizing, obviously, because I can't call an entire characterize an entire country by the people that come to watch me at a show. But I have found that there's just a level of appreciation with German audiences. I think it's kind of a seriousness that maybe Germans don't think of themselves in that way. But when I juxtapose it against playing in a country like Spain, where people are very exuberant and energetic, but maybe not, it might be a little more difficult to play an acoustic show when everyone's in kind of a excitable party mode. Again, I'm generalizing, obviously. Whereas I find in Germany and the Netherlands and lots of that part of the world, especially doing the acoustic shows, it's wonderful for me because I have an audience that's paying attention, that's supportive, that knows the work, that cares about the work. And I've had difficulty, in parts of America where people are, wanting to take photos of themselves rather than enjoy the show. And again, it's generalizing the wonderful other shows that we've done. So yeah, the country, each country and its cultural characteristics do play a huge role in deciding where it is that we're going to go and or that I'm going to go solo. So Germany's been very kind to me and has been very supportive of the Awakening. I want to say since 1999, German labels started putting Awakening songs on compilations and that sort of thing. And then definitely in 2000, when we released The Dark Romantics, which has become kind of the band's like flagship song, that was featured on a whole bunch of compilations all over the world. Back when CD compilations used to be the way we would discover bands, the Zelo and Orcus and all those were putting out, and Sonic Seducer, all those were putting out these compilation CDs. And similarly in America, Cleopatra and Metropolis and those sorts of labels. So I think having Dark Romantics be on so many of those, and then once Spotify happened or streaming happened, it's on so many playlists. That's the equivalent of that now. And that's helped us see where those audiences are, really, to get back to your question, because and then sometimes it just takes a while. We played Mexico City for the first time ever last year. I'd never been to Mexico, and honestly, it was one of my absolute favorite shows that I've ever played. The people were incredible. They were just so involved and animated and singing along to every song. And it was a small venue, and we'd sold it out. It was kind of a what do you call it? A showcase, I guess, for us to prove to the promoters that we could pull a crowd. And it was just incredible. I signed records for like 3 hours after the show, and they were just pushing people through. One of them said, like, don't write anything, Ashton, just sign them, or you're going to be in bed at 4:00 in the morning, and just incredible. So even though you think you found your people all over the world, it's just incredible in the digital age how we can still connect and then find out, oh, wow, they really love me in Slovakia or wherever. Someone reaches out and you get a conversation going. And if you can find a way to cover the costs, because there's no real money to be made in touring, but if you can find a way to cover the costs, then you get to share this wonderful experience together. And it's probably why I just can't stop. I just keep doing this,
Mhm. Great. And what's really important to you to feel comfortable at a show, before the show, after the show, regarding, for example, catering or backstage circumstances? What's important?
That's a good question. Before and after, what's important is to have my own space so I can just center and prepare for the show. I make a lot of jokes and I'm a relatively lighthearted person, but I do take what I do very seriously, and I care about giving the best version of myself. So in a backstage environment, I just want somewhere quiet where we're going to be left alone, to prepare for the show. And then the show itself, my favorite experience is that people are there to see what it is that we're doing and are there to celebrate with us. And that can be 50 or 5,000. It doesn't really matter. As long as that's why they're there, it gives us so much energy and gives me so much energy to have that exchange going. Obviously, having good sound, making sure that everything works properly is very important. It's really difficult when you have some kind of technical challenge for the entire show and you've got to just kind of keep going, and that's horrible. It's I've had a few of those, of course. I've been playing a lot. And then after the show, I'm still one of those guys that goes to the merch stand and I meet the people and I sign records and take photos and all the rest, because I feel like for as long as I can, for as long as it's feasible, I've been in environments where there are, for example, many thousands of people, and then I can't do that. But if I'm playing a show where it's a couple hundred people, 300 people, whatever, I will, if possible, and it's safe to do so, I'll absolutely go and meet people after the show, stand at the merch table and all of that. And I enjoy that. I enjoy that, again, that it's all about community ultimately. So to meet the members of the community face to face and to just share a moment together, even if it's just a minute where you get to find out a little bit something more about somebody else. And that's important to me. So as long as I'm able to do that, I enjoy doing that.
People outside come to the merch table after the show.
Yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely. I might take 5 minutes to go and, take off all the sweaty clothes and put on something fresh, but I'll be there. I'll be at the merch table. Yeah.
And I think we'll come to an end slowly, but I have to ask, you mentioned, for example, telling jokes and stuff, and we know goth being always said is a cliche. So you probably have a good sense of humor, as most goths have. What has been the really, really funniest situation you ever had on a show or around a show?
Well, many. And yeah, especially my solo shows, I always say there's a percentage of music, there's a percentage that's like stand-up comedy, because I just get very comfortable with people and I almost encourage them to heckle, to shout out things, because there's again, it's a communion, right? And then part of it might be almost perceived to be motivational speaking, because I'm trying to uplift people ultimately, and I share stories and I share bits from my books and that. Less so in a rock show environment. It's not quite as intimate, but there's some of that will come through. I think the most bizarre experience I ever had on stage, which maybe it's not funny, but it was certainly funny a lot later. It was surprising at the time, but a lot funnier later, was the early days of the Awakening. Not that early, I guess about 3 years into the Awakening's existence. I was playing a show in South Africa, and I didn't realize that the stage had faulty wiring. So there was like a steel rim around the stage, okay? And I was very into being as dramatic as possible, and channeling the spirit of Iggy Pop and all of that. And at some point, I'm like crawling across the stage, and there's a guy reaching out his hand to shake my hand. And he has his hand on the steel thing, and he reaches out his hand, and I put the touch, and I reach out, and we complete the circuit. So as we touch hands, there's this massive jolt, and we both sort of move backwards. And I forgot where I was for 30 seconds, and the music's carrying on, and then I kind of return and carry on singing. And I always laugh about this because I think, given our image and how dark the image was at the time, he probably thought, wow, Ashton Nyte, that guy's just like electricity flows through him, it's just powerful. And it was faulty wiring. But yeah, touring, there's always those sorts of stories, it's you got to just roll with it. We played Castle Party last year, and there was so much, it rained so hard. Everything was wet. I mean, it's like everything. So, you just got that choice of, I might die tonight because there's so many cables on the stage and there's all this stuff, and they'd set me really far back. But I mean, after doing one song, feeling like you're hiding away from the people, I just kind of moved everything into the rain, and carried on. And I don't know, I think people, they pick up on that. If you really want to be there, they know. And when you watch bands where they're just kind of phoning it in and they're just going through the motions, the audience is not stupid. They can feel that. And then everything disconnects, and then there's no point, So if I'm there, I'm going to be trying to make it as magical as possible for everybody.
I'm looking forward to your shows here in Germany. Probably will come to Dortmund or Cologne. let's see. But
Thank
after
you.
the tour, what are your plans then? Do you have some?
After the tour, I am working on a new solo record. So I have already written and recorded most of it. I just need to some additional recording and production. And I'll be getting that ready probably to release in April of next year. And then of course there'll be more touring next year, both for the Awakening and solo again. And we'll try and do some other countries next year, ones that we haven't been to in a while, or ones that we haven't been to ever. Portugal's one of my favorite cities, countries. Porto is one of my favorite cities in Portugal, and we've had such lovely shows there, but it just hasn't worked out with the routing and logistics. So I'm hoping to try and return to some of those cities next year. But of course, I'll probably pop in Germany because I can't stay away from Germany. I just keep every year I'm there for a few shows at least. So yeah,
Oh, we would be angry.
those are the basic plans for now. We'll see how it goes.
We would be angry if you wouldn't come here.
Yeah, absolutely. And I know that and I respect that. So I'll be back.
Okay. So you can keep in mind when your solo record is ready, we can do another talk maybe about this one. Would be
Yeah,
cool.
that'll be great. I'm very excited about that. I'm not to overshadow this record. I'm loved making this record. And I think for what this record does for the awakening and for me as the person writing the songs, I think the new solo record will do for that side of my personality. I think they're both some of the strongest um, pieces of work for me that resonate for me. So that feels good. Feels good to be so passionate about what you're doing after so many years. So many artists, I think, they always think about their first two records or their first three records as their glory days, and they're very excited. I really don't feel that way. I feel like I have a better understanding of what I'm doing and a better way. I find better ways of expressing myself and connecting with people the older I get. So I feel like I'm living my best artistic life right now, which is very exciting.
Yeah. And you look young, you look fresh, so you will be around for many, many more years, hopefully, and do many more records.
Thank you. Those very kind words. I think it's all the clean living. It's all the clean living helps me still look relatively alive. So yeah, I have no plans of stopping. This is my passion. So thank you so much.
Yeah. And before we end, do you have some message, some greetings to the audience?
Only the same message, which is gratitude. Thank you so much for the ongoing support in various shapes and forms. It sounds cliche, but none of us can do this without support. And to have the not just fan support, but the kindness of the community and the support of the community means a lot to me. Thank you.
So thanks to you for the great talk.
Thank you.
People outside, thanks for watching. The Awakening, Ashton Nyte, I just can recommend. Great guy. Album coming now, and I say bye-bye. Cheers.
Bye bye.